Hey guys, Hayden here again from Alarm System Store, and today I thought we'd go over basically just all the different door contacts that we carry. These are door and window contacts, I guess. But essentially, this is mainly for, newer people that are trying to get into DIYing their own alarm system. You may go to, multiple websites and type in door contacts and just not even know what you're looking at all. So I thought we'd go over the basics when it comes to door contacts, and these are all the different types we carry. So I'll give a little detail about each type, but I do have them sorted here. So on top are the surface mount contacts. So surface mount contacts are exactly what they sound. They are surface mounted, so they basically just stick onto, the outside of the window or the door that you're putting it on, so they are visible, but that makes them easier to install. On the bottom here, we have all of our recessed contacts. So recessed contacts, you actually have to drill into the door or window frame to install them correctly, and basically it keeps them a little bit more hidden so that people, for one, it's more aesthetically clean, and people can't look in to see, if this window's got a sensor on it and that one doesn't, blah, blah, blah. So, starting up here in the top right, now before we start going into each individual one, I do want to cover a couple important things to know before you start buying door contacts. And that is that all door contacts that we carry, and most that other DIY dealers, proper ones, carry, are normally closed operation sensors. Now what that means is when the magnet is close to the sensor like this, it shows a closed circuit to the panel. There are normally open door contacts where when the sensor is away from the magnet, it shows a closed circuit to the panel. Now, the data sheet when you're reading this can be very misleading, because technically these are normally open sensors. So this is the sensor itself. So this by itself, when there's no outside force on it, is normally open. And that's what we want for a standard alarm system. When we put the magnet to it, meaning the door is closed, we want that circuit to close so that the system sees that it's a closed circuit. So whenever you're reading the data sheets, it will say all of these different contacts that we carry are technically normally open. However, they use normally closed operation. So like I said, when the magnet is close, it shows a closed circuit. So a lot of times what you'll see is, door contacts that are listed on like Amazon or eBay, things like that. It might not list whether they're normally open or normally closed, and it's hard to tell just from looking at the sensor because they all look very similar. So I do recommend, you don't have to purchase them from us, but I would recommend making sure that wherever you get them from, it actually does properly list the circuit type for each individual sensor. And if you have a question, reach out to whoever it is that you're buying from. However, since these are ours, I'm obviously just going to be able to go over those. So we'll just start at the top left. These two that I've been playing with, these are just your standard surface mount block style contacts. So like I was saying, this is the sensor itself. So you can see the sensor side is always going to have wire terminals. So sometimes you'll have a lead where wires actually come off of these. We don't carry any like that. However, it'll always have either the wires or the terminals there so that you can attach this to the wire. The other part is just a magnet. That's all this is. So inside of here is a reed switch, and if you're unfamiliar with how that works, imagine basically two very thin pieces of metal that basically sit next to each other like this. Whenever you put the magnet close to this, it makes those two pieces of metal touch together from the magnetic force. So that is all a reed switch is. It's basically just a couple pieces of metal that either touch or don't, depending on whether they are hit with magnetic force. So like I was saying, these are normally closed operation. So right now, without the magnet here, those pieces of metal are sitting like this. They're sitting open. So this is a normally open contact. However, when we apply the magnetic force, such as the door closing, it closes that circuit and shows a normally closed operation. So that is all. Basically all these ones up here they just have reed switches inside of them. However, they are all a little bit different. Like I said, these are just your standard run-of-the-mill block-style contacts. They come with the double-sided tape on the bottom, and they have holes and screws for mounting for long-term. Generally, you do want to use both. However, some windows and door manufacturers, it will actually void the warranty if you screw into the door or window. So you can just use the double-sided tape. Just know that double-sided tape will fail after a few years, so you might want to go back through, get new double-sided tape, reattach them, so on and so forth. So the two colors we carry in most of our contacts are this white and this brown. So black contacts are fairly rare. We can get them, but they do have to be a bulk order. So if you need like a bunch of them, we can get black. However, for the most part, it's just going to be these white and the brown because they're cheaper. Moving on to the next one, this is what's called a wide gap sensor. So you can see the construction's a little bit more serious here, and sometimes they get a little stuck together, but basically this is the contact side. So you can see it's a little bit thicker, a little bit sturdier. It is also only in gray, unfortunately, but it has your wire terminals here, and inside is just a reed switch like I was saying before. So it actually has this little cover that goes on, and then once that's on, you can put your screws through the whole thing, and it looks a little bit cleaner than the standard style. Now, like I was saying, this is the wide gap version of the sensor. So this magnet is a little bit bigger, and it's actually a bit stronger than the magnets that you would get with the standard style. And that is because this wide gap version is meant for doors that aren't perfectly aligned, or situations where, let's say you had a back door that, didn't quite sit still whenever the wind was blowing hard and it kind of jiggles. So these wide gap sensors are good for those situations, so that you don't have to replace the door. You can just have a little bit more space between the magnet and the reed switch so that it'll still show that closed circuit. So if you need, take stock of your, doors and windows that you're going to be putting these sensors on. If everything's brand new, then you should be fine going with the standard. But if your house is a little bit older and, some of it's kind of worn out, you might think about going with some of these wide gap sensors, and that way you do have a little bit more play in how close the magnet has to be. It's also good for, if you have like a staggered door where the door doesn't quite sit flush, so the contact can be down here, the magnet can be up here. Generally, you do want to try and get those as close to each other as possible and perfectly lined up, but these wide gap sensors give more play specifically for that reason. Now, this particular model does come with these spacers, so you can use these as needed. So, if you needed to stack a couple of them up and then you wanted to put them on, the frame side, you could do that. That gives you a little bit more spacing so that the contact sits a little bit higher up off the frame, and it might match up a little bit better with where the magnet's placed, so on and so forth. So, moving on from there, we have the pill style contacts, and that is these. Now, the pill style, same concept. You got the sensor here with the terminals. It's just got a reed switch inside, and then you have a smaller magnet, and it's actually a decent bit weaker than the other ones. So these are really only good for, situations where they are going to be very close together. However, they're a lot lower profile, so they're a lot easier to look at. They don't stand out as much as these block style sensors do, and not nearly as much as these wide gap sensors do. So these would be good for windows. If you don't want to go through the process of drilling into your windows and so on and so forth, you can use these, and it's a lot cleaner to look at these. However, you do just have to be very careful about the placement, because they do have to be very close to each other to work properly. Now, you do have a little bit of play. I'd say you could probably get it about that far apart reasonably. But like I said, you want them as close as possible, especially with these style. Now, moving on from there, we'll go to the recessed style contacts. So I didn't have the white one of this, but this is the standard recessed style contact. So on one side, we have our wire input, our wire terminals and screws. And this is the side that has the reed switch inside. And then this is the magnet. So as you can see, both of them are designed to basically fit into holes. You can kind of see the little beveled edges there. That sits up against the frame after you drill a hole. This is a 3/8 inch recessed contact. So what you do is you just take a drill bit that's 3/8 inch thick, and then you drill a hole on the frame side, and then you drill one on the window or door side, and you just stick them inside. With this, the terminal side, you're going to want to feed the wire in, connect it, and then shove it in. But once it's in, those edges will keep it locked in place, and basically, as your window or door raises, it just, lifts the magnet away from it. So these are just going to be your standard style. The only, thing that might be a deal breaker for these is that you might be able to drill into the frame without voiding the warranty, but you might not be able to drill into the window or the door. And some windows you don't want to drill into, period, because you might break the glass. So these might not be the best choice for everything, but they are good for most door situations. Windows, you might want to think about going with the next model we have here. Now this style comes with the exact same sensor that we just talked about. However, these come with a rare earth magnet. And rare earth magnets actually come in all shapes and sizes. The ones we get are basically the same size as the contact though. And we use these so that you don't have to drill into the window or the door itself. So the magnet itself can just be used with this double-sided tape here, and then you can just stick it onto the window or door. Now, if you're okay with putting a screw in, it does come with a screw, so you just stick that through there, screw it into the door or the window, and it keeps the recessed nature so that you can't see it, it's hidden. However, if you do, maybe have a bigger gap, those would be a good option, and it doesn't require you to drill into the door or window, so these are really good for window applications. Moving on from there, we have the 3/4 inch recess style contacts. Now these are meant more for metal doors. So the reason they are so big is that inside here, it's basically the exact same concept as the ones we just talked about. However, this outer shielding keeps the metal further away from the magnet. So magnets, over time, if you put them near metal, they will slowly lose their magnetic charge. So the point of these is to keep that gap in there, and it reduces the amount of charge that's lost over time. So this style, when used with a metal door, will last a lot longer than one of these would. Because eventually you will have to replace the magnet on this. This might last the lifetime of your system, or as long as you're going to be in any particular house. Now on this side, same concept. It does have, the wire terminals right here, and inside here is just a reed switch. The housing is just so big so that it matches up with this one. And all you see once you put them in there is basically just this cover. So we do have these in white and brown, just like all the others, except for this one. So, choose whatever's going to look best in there. And for these, you have to drill a 3/4 inch hole to fit them in, but it has these little ridges here that keeps it in place, and you don't ever have to worry about it. Moving on to the last door contact we have. This is basically a push button sensor. So operation is very simple. You just drill a 3/4 inch hole, same as these, and it has these two,